This is the Bush Whisperer coming at you from the most beautiful penguin sanctuary, Cape Agulhas, southern tip of Africa, Builders Beach, Simonstown. For you to get an idea of where we are, there you can see the little guy behind me. I just mustn't get too close to him, because he might think I mean harm. These guys have got razor sharp beaks, but they are totally cute. Hey? Hello, little thing. Come to talk to you today about the pattern of time, the pattern of space, the pattern of the universe. Got one of these guys right in front of my feet, so I'm going to wait for him to walk away before I continue walking. You might think I'm trying to step on him. They normally can be quite aggressive. Today they're particularly calm. And of course, this is the Bush Whisperer. The pattern of time and space. The universe is essentially a series of habits. A series of habits that follow a pattern. And by understanding that the universe is a series of habits following a pattern, it can give us a bit of an insight into the nature of the self. Bless you, Joshua. Bless you. We think of the self as a fixed thing. We almost consider the self as if it's an object, because we like to consider the self objectively. But it's better to consider the self in a subjective manner, to realize that there is no real self that's fixed. What we consider to be ourselves, and when I say ourselves, I don't mean the ego, not the true ego, I mean the persona which is worn by the ego. The way you wear a shirt of your torso. It's not your torso, but if somebody is talking about your torso, they will point at the shirt that covers your torso, because it looks like your torso. And there's an awareness that your torso is reflecting the form through the shirt. And so there's a relativity between your torso and the shirt, or the top that you're wearing. In the same way, the persona is worn by the ego. And so one often uses the word ego when they're actually talking about the persona. I did actually do a video about words and how the persona and the ego are so confused. And so it is with the universe. We think of the universe as a fixed, static thing that's statically in motion. But in actually it's nothing more than a process of pattern that is habitually repeating itself, with subtle differences, and the habituality is controlled or accentuated by the mathematics of the golden phi ratio, as we've noticed. All life follows this pattern. Thoughts follow this pattern. Consciousness is structured according to this pattern. Good morning. And so we are in this pattern of life which is habitually reflected, and the habit is to reflect it almost the same as it was, but not quite the same. For there is a evolution in this pattern that is a consistency of change, and the consistency of change, that's the only thing that seems static. That is essentially the fixed universe that we're speaking of when you really get down to it. Everything else is just the habit of patterns repeating itself in very, very subtly different ways to what it did before. And so the web of causality is born. And the distinctions of objectifying this subjective experience is a human condition, part of the anthropomorphic state of self. For we objectively view ourselves, and so we objectively view the universe, and vice versa, the macrocosm and the microcosm as they were called. The shaman is deeply aware of how this works. So the shaman considers the whole universe as being an extension of the great dream, the great spirit's influence through ourselves, through the guides, moving the pattern of being and changing the subtle spectrum of habits as per the flow of evolution. And it is in this deep state of consciousness that the shaman is able to gain the revelation of the guides, of being aware that things are not what they are. And so animals aren't what they are, people aren't what they are, nothing is what it seems to be. The whole universe is a dream. And the dream is essentially a pattern of habits or shall we say a habitual pattern of habits. And to understand that habits are how we objectify this universe is another interesting concept. We habitually objectify the universe in a habitual way. We conceive of the universe as being a fixed object. And so we objectify everything that we can see and touch and create within ourselves a confluence of being so that we are able to map the objectivity in terms of objects. And we separate these objects by the spectrum of the filters within our conscious field. And so we're able to perceive the differences, and the rational intellect is able to operate in such a manner. It's really important to understand that habits are what cause us to be stuck here. Habits are what cause us to be living the way that we're living. The act of breathing, the act of eating, everything is bound by these divine law of habits in a habitat of habituality. See, even the word habitat is expressing this. Something to be understood in the power of words, how they work, what they mean truly, what they're reflecting on the deep down levels. Habits also relating to the church, if you want to get right down to the words of it. So, understanding that the habits that we have are what structure the self means that there's much possibility of change always available to one. One can transform oneself at a moment's notice. One can transform one's entire universe by changing the habits of one's actions, habits of one's words, habits of one's thinking, habits of one's belief, the habits of the perception, the habits of awareness. And when we start to delve deep into the habits, we're able to actually transform the very universe around us. This is deep knowledge a shaman understands. See, the reason why the shaman goes into a trance with the music and the trance of the dance is that the shaman is directly engaging with the habits of being, changing the habits of movement, changing the habits of thinking, changing the habits of sound, and in tuning a new habitual state of consciousness, which alters the habitat around oneself. This is where the power of the dance comes through, and why the shaman is able to transform the world around through the powers that move within. For everything that moves within is habitually transforming the world around us. For the universe around us is an expression of that which is within us. And it is the pattern that makes this be so. The pattern that is the blueprint of what the soul is, of what the self is. Expressing the habits of being that we call personality through the ego, through the self. So understanding this is a great sense of personal power and a great sense of freedom. And to realize that by changing one's habits, one can change so much is true power. This is a great ancient secret knowledge that has been lost to us. It's so simple. It's like the great master, Yeshua, said to us. One needs to approach the spirit with the heart and the mind of a child. For it is only the heart and the mind of a child that can understand the greatness of this universe and how simple and how small the greatness is. For gratefulness is what opens us to the recognition of how great things are. We need to fill ourselves with the greatness of being in order for the reality of truth to become expressed through the conscious experience of this awareness of life and of self through being. This is the Bush Whisperer coming at you on one of the most beautiful mornings. It's the first morning, it's so warm, and beautiful sunrise touched my eyes, inspired me with the thought of new habits, the habit of life. For when one watches the sunrise in the morning, one is attuning oneself with the habit of life. And so the pattern of life starts to fill one's being, and this transforms one's habits of thinking, speaking, and action. Have an absolutely gorgeous day, and don't forget, the habits that you create is the reality you're stuck with. So create a beautiful habit, and you will have a wonderful habitat. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.